Welcome to Solar Safety Week, Wednesday, 22nd of June. Wow, this is day 3. I'm so super excited and so happy that we all took the time out to be a part of this wonderful week. I just want to thank the previous presenters, Frank Apodaca, Ariana. We had my HR, Jessica Jenkins did a great presentation as well. And of course, our beautiful Kelly joins us again today. So I appreciate you so very much. Today, we have the honor of one of my favorite people in the whole planet, Mr. Alex Luna. Today, he's going to be speaking about code requirement safety training. And we have the beautiful Kate speaking about thermal events. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. All right. So, code requirement safety training. And here to tell us all about that is Alex Luna. I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Cairo. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this Solar Safety Week. I think safety is something we all tend to, at some point, career-wise or at home, kind of take advantage of. And just, we need to make sure we make it part of our daily routine. Um, Cairo, yeah. So, like Cairo mentioned, Alex Luna. Uh, I'm the special projects manager at Carolina Solar. I've been here for 4 years. Uh, Before that, I spent about a year and a half at Strata Solar, and prior to that, was I retired from the Air Force. I did 20 years, and I was in aircraft maintenance. So, when it came to safety, it was definitely something that was high up on my board there. Wanted to make sure I went home the way I got to work. So, all right. So, like Cairo mentioned, we're talking about code requirement safety training, and basically we see here on this side OSHA and NFPA 70E. Those are kind of the big drivers behind the safety in what we do. OSHA, we hear a lot about it. What is it? It was set up by Congress in the 70s. Um, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and basically OSHA's around to ensure the safe and healthful working condition for workers by setting and enforcing the standards by providing training, outreach, and education and assistance. And I know that's something that Frank, he's kind of helped us out a couple times. He's reached out to OSHA and said, "Hey, this is how we do stuff, or this is stuff we encounter. Are we being safe? What kind of safety measures we can put in place? What kind of training should we be doing?" So OSHA, they're not out there to just catch you when you're doing wrong. They're also there to help you with guidelines of what we need to do when it comes to, as far as making sure we have a safe work environment, what trainings we should be required. Um, and then on the other side of that, NFPA, it's the electrical safety in the workplace. It sets the standards from the National Fire Protection Association. NFPA 70E is intended to provide guidance with respect to electrical safe workplace practices. So OSHA is kind of broad and hits just about everything. And then NFPA and NFPA 70E kind of narrow that down into, kind of where we fall in with electrical work safe practices. NFPA 70E helps companies and employees avoid workplace injuries and fatalities due to shock, electrocution, arc flash, and arc blast. Uh, and it also helps us kind of comply with OSHA 1910. Again, it sets, NFPA 70E will set some specific guidelines for what kind of safety trainings we need in our field, in the electrical field, to stay safe, to, keep us from having those arc flashes and arc blasts. And definitely when it comes to getting shocked and electrocuted, just kind of what we need to put in place. Uh, they both set the minimum requirements for electrical safety programs. And we should all have safety programs that we're going to lay out guidelines as far as what kind of trainings we're going to need for our employees, for ourselves, to make sure that we're being safe. Next slide, please. right, so talked about electrical safety programs, and again, OSHA kind of puts out this blanket instruction there that each employer shall furnish a workplace that is free from recognized hazards and that have um, anyway. But big thing is what we need to put in place to protect our workers, protect our employees, protect ourselves. And so the purpose is to set up programs that are going to lay out those foundations as far as what trainings we're gonna need for our jobs. Everything has its inherent dangers, everything, and so it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that the employees have the trainings and are aware of the dangers that they're going to be coming across in their work. And so, in order to do that, again, OSHA and NFPA kind of set out some guidelines of what the trainings that the employees will have to make sure that they're safe. Next slide. All right. So some of the get out of here, dog. So, some of the electrical the required trainings um, will be electrical safety trainings, qualified versus unqualified person, um, lockout tagout programs. That's a big thing to make sure that we're keeping employees safe by making sure things are equipment is de-energized and will stay in that de-energized state while work is being performed on them, and through no outside interaction will become energized, therefore endangering employees and potentially putting them at risk to shock, electrocution, arc flash, arc blast. Emergency response training, first aid, um, uh, co- uh, contact hazard training. What happens if someone is exposed to something that's energized and they become stuck? How can we safely get them removed? So NFPA 70 establishes the safety process that we're going to follow and set up this safety program to lay out the trainings that we're going to provide, we're going to get to make sure we're being safe. And then also, it's going to lay out any kind of reoccurring annual, biannual trainings that we're going to have to take in order to stay qualified and be qualified personnel. And then emergency response training is going to, hit up on those first aid, CPR, AED, and those are going to be set up on an annual reoccurring basis. Next slide. For an example of some of that training is the contact release safety training program. Amicus has developed a safety training program that addresses some of the requirements that are set forth in NFPA 70E. Contact release training is posted up on the LMS, and we're actively working on developing further training materials to make sure that we meet all of those requirements. And training isn't just limited to the classroom or on the job. So there's a degree of how training can be accomplished, and it also depends on the risk that we're trying to mitigate, and then also, this way we kind of cover the basis of how people learn differently. If everything was just a PowerPoint slideshow, people tend to zone out, versus in the field where they get to see, and they'll tend to be a little more open when it comes to asking questions as far as why are we doing this to this piece of equipment? Why are we doing that to that piece of equipment? So it's something that when it comes to trainings, we can develop things internally that are going to work best for what we're doing and for our people. Next slide. All right. Again, this is kind of OSHA, big blanket, 1910 here. It's going to basically mirror. Okay. Yeah. So it's going to mirror NFPA, Article 110.6 when it comes to training requirements and what's going to be needed. Between OSHA and NFPA, neither one's going to take away from the other. So OSHA's not going to say you can't do this, and then NFPA is going to go ahead and say you can. So they're going to work kind of hand in hand to make sure that one is going to kind of give a broad explanation of things, and then the other will narrow that down. You can always add, but they won't take away. So big thing that comes up in OSHA and in NFPA 70E is a qualified person. So what makes a person considered a qualified individual? And that once you have met all of those training requirements that have been laid out for your job, for that task at hand, for the work that you're going to be completing, once you've reached all those training milestones, safety training milestones, that makes you a qualified individual. Sorry about that, the dog. Qualified person is someone whose work on energized equipment involves either direct contact or contact by means of tools or materials that must have the safety training in order to conduct that work. So next slide. Yeah. So energized work, that's one of the big things that where a qualified individual comes in. You know, what is energized work? Sometimes we hear that a lot. And so it's the big thing is that there's a difference between what the work that is allowed to be accomplished on something when it's energized. And the big thing is that person must be a qualified individual because they're going to be crossing some boundaries and they're going to be at a higher risk. And so we need to make sure that this person understands those boundaries and has the proper training and knows the type of work the type of work that they're going to be doing and whether or not it can indeed be done when something is energized. So Article 100 here gives us a definition of what working on is considered. And repairs, it draws a big distinction between performing repairs and diagnostic testing work. Repairs that involve the actual physical replacement interaction with circuit parts that are actually energized, that you can't accomplish unless you have a energized work permit. And again, it must be completed by a qualified individual. Something that we do a lot in our field, thermography, voltage readings, preventative maintenance, and to a degree, some troubleshooting. All that's considered diagnostic work, testing work, and that's permitted again. But the big thing to keep in mind, and this is something that they'll gather in their trainings, is that there's a level of PPE that is required in order to accomplish that work. And so a qualified individual will know that and have that available and they'll have the training and they'll have the PPE available in order to do this work. And so, but wait, did I skip a slide? No. Yeah. All right. Next slide. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Alice, for a great presentation. I have one question. What is some safety training or that all field staff and or office staff should have? What's one safety tool that you think we all need?
Big proponent for first aid, CPR, AED, because that's something that, you know, is not just something we would use at work. It could in the field, great, because primarily should be in teams of two. So again, if someone goes down for whatever reason, you're able to recognize certain things. If it's just heat stroke, heat stress, or heart attack or anything like that, choking. And then in the office, there are dangers. Again, someone can fall down a flight of stairs, break an arm or something like that. And then in the home, again, we'll have that training to where we can put what we learned for work into practice at home. Some of us with kids, they go out and you turn around for a second, and next thing you know, it's like, Mom, Dad, I broke my arm. I mean, that's what I did, and it's like, okay, what do we do? And so you're able to provide that first level of care. So I think first aid CPR is something everyone can get.
Fantastic. And my last question is, what is your stance in regards to a long work versus a safety second? How do you feel about that?
I think, again, qualified individuals will be performing the work. And so, you'll know your limitations as far as what your training goes, what your PPE will take you. And so that kind of gives you that first step, what we can do. Safety second is always best. It's, because you have that other individual there, again, for whatever, more than just to hand you tools or whatnot, but to help with the troubleshooting. And in case things kind of do take a little turn, they're able to provide assistance. So I think the big thing is just you got to know when to kind of call it and get that safety second in.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Alex, for a great presentation. Since no one has any other questions, I feel like we should go ahead and move on to our next topic. I'm so super excited. Solar without fear. I have my new friend here ready to present, and she will talk about thermal events, unraveling the mystery. So please take it away, Kate.
Hi, everyone. I am very excited to be here. Thanks for asking me to talk about this topic. I'd love to give you a little background on myself. And am I in control of these slides? Hey, I am. All right. So I support our customer service team here at Omnidian. I have been in the industry since 2006. I joined as an installer and have had various roles in this industry and since then. I am NABCEP certified. I've served on the COSA board, and one of my most recent volunteer endeavors is solarrecycle.org. I'm part of the team that put together that website. So there's a question that I'm supposed to answer about why safety is important to me, and in all reality, safety is the foundation of a viable industry, and we've been working for a long time to become a viable industry, and here we are at this amazing state that I didn't think was possible in 2006. But to continue to be seen as viable, we have to protect our workforce, and we need to do that by installing safely. So, give me a sec. Sorry, technical. So let's tackle the question of what is a thermal event. I'll preface this by saying that I have done some extensive research on this topic that was limited solely to a LinkedIn post where I tagged a handful of nerds in the industry and posed the question, what is a thermal event? The reason I did this, we were having an internal debate about what the definition of a thermal event is, and here are two things that I learned. One, there is no official definition of a thermal event. Two, lots of men have fragile egos, and those who I neglected to tag in that post were offended and reached out to me individually to tell me privately what their definitions are of thermal events, and I'm sorry that I didn't tag anyone, or everyone, as it were. So here are some of the responses I got to the question. We don't have an official definition, but we certainly have strong opinions. But I think the one up here on the top right is very telling, that perhaps this term started as a joke. We used to call them fires, and then someone thought that it might give solar a bad name to start fires. So so they started calling them thermal events. And that was kind of the general consensus, is a thermal event is a fire. Now, what I learned is that some entities, some companies take that definition a little farther and say that a thermal event is a fire that causes structural damage. And without that structural damage, it's not a thermal event. It's just excessive heat, an arc, an electrical failure. There are lots of different ideas about what that would be called. And then of course, there were, I got a pretty good joker. I thought that was pretty funny. It's what a thermal event is when you need your thermals. So, so in conclusion, this is a short this is a short one, y'all. There is no official definition, but in the end, it means a fire. At Omnidian, we have adopted the definition that it is a fire that causes damage to the structure, and damage can be limited to charring, like just the effects of smoke. But if you can see the effects of smoke on the building, then we consider that a thermal event. Absent that smoke on the building, if you can only see that charring inside of the equipment, then it is not an official thermal event. In general, as an industry, we don't want thermal events. So let's all work to install safely. So let's talk about what causes thermal events. Most are caused due to component failure. And this is outside of our sphere of control. If a piece of equipment's going to fail, then that is, that's on the manufacturer most of the time. So what are things that are within our sphere of control that can cause thermal events? A big one is wires. You got to torque your wires properly. You want to make sure you get out that torquing screwdriver, and do not over or under tighten those lugs. They have to be tightened to manufacturer specs. Look it up. They all have them. Want to make sure we're not pinching wires, getting wires pinched underneath module frames, between the frames and the racks. You need to make sure that all of your equipment is rated for the purpose that it's being used. If you have DC running through a fuse, that has to be a DC fuse. You should not run DC through an AC fuse. So making sure that you're using the proper equipment. You got to use the right wire size. Do all your calculations, do your derating, and make sure you're using the right wire size. Stripping wires correctly, especially stranded wires. Need to make sure that you're not getting extra strands out with the insulation when you're stripping your wires. So make sure and strip wires carefully and correctly. Make sure you stay within the limits of devices. So if you've got a box that's rated to, I don't know, 400 volts DC, and you're running 600 volts through it, that's not going to work. So those are some of the big ones. Also, oxidation can be the cause. So use Noalox, that sort of thing, when you're installing, to make sure that you're not going to get a lot of oxidation that would cause, over time, might be the cause of a thermal event. So those are my tips for thermal events. I certainly appreciate all of your time. If anyone has any questions, I am happy to answer them, and I'll take a look.
Thank you so much, Kate. We
Yeah.
really appreciate a great presentation that you presented on thermal events today. Hello, guys. Is there any questions from the group?
I really appreciate the definition of thermal event, which we use that term here at Carolina Solar Services. Fortunately, not all that often, but when we do use it, we like to implement. We don't like to say the F word here, is what I like to say. So thanks, that's great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rory. All right, well, guys, this is day 3 of Solar Safety Week. I thank you all for your time. We look forward to the same time, same station, same channel. I don't know how you're supposed to say it, same teams. Meet us here again tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern, and I appreciate your time and thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your day.